What's up, everyone? Kevin Allen here from DFS Army. And today we are breaking down daily fantasy football strategy that will help you win on FanDuel and Draftkings. And what I'm going to dive into today, let me give you the full me here. What I'm going to dive into today is one of the questions I get most frequently from DFS Army subscribers, from members, from anybody who talks to me about daily fantasy football. And it's also one of the things that I think is the least understood concepts in daily fantasy sports. So I'm really excited to go over the difference, not just between these contest types, but the approach, the mentality, and the lineup construction strategies for cash games, single entry / 3-max versus mass multi-entry tournaments. That is the focus for today. Now, one of the reasons why I picked this topic to cover is because I always get, from the newest people who start to play daily fantasy sports, one of the first things, they don't even understand what the difference is between these contest types. Forget about understanding the strategic difference in lineup construction. They don't even understand what the words mean. So we're going to cover that, but more importantly, we're going to get into advanced understandings of how to attack cash games, how to change that strategy for 3-entry max type contests, and of course, how to completely change your strategy and your approach when you're attacking top-heavy tournaments. But I guess before we get into all that, we'll explain what are these different contest types. So, what are cash games? Cash games in daily fantasy sports are games played with essentially 50-50 or something close to 50-50 odds. If I'm playing against another person head-to-head, or if I'm in a double-up or what's called a 50-50 contest where the top half of lineups wind up in the money, that's a cash game. Cash games also don't necessarily reward you for having a monster score. So if we are in a cash game and the cash line is 150 fantasy points in NFL, if I score 151 fantasy points, I'm going to make just as much money in that tournament, in that contest, as somebody who is scoring 250 points, which might have won a tournament and $1 million for them. But in this cash game, it does them no good. We don't actually want to be the highest scoring lineup in our cash games. Now, single entry 3-max is a hybrid off of what I would call cash game approaches, where you're essentially entering smaller tournaments. Now, I don't really count massive top-heavy tournaments that are single entry or 3-max in this discussion. When I refer to single entry and 3-max games, what I'm really referring to are contests that don't have a ton of entrants but are a tournament. Usually these are, it's hard to say for a higher dollar amount, because the reality is dollar amounts vary from person to person. I think it's irrelevant if it's a $12 contest or a $1,200 contest. What's much more relevant is these types of contests that we want to attack have between, let's say, 60 to 250 entrants. They're much more winnable, and they don't require a perfect score to win. And we'll cover some examples of this as we go through this video. And finally, the third type is top-heavy or our top-heavy mass multi-entry style tournaments. These are the types of tournaments where you generally want to attack them with mass multi-entry, meaning maxing out the contest, be them 20 entry or more frequently 150 entry type contests, the mini max contests on DraftKings, the Million Maker contest on DraftKings if you have a higher budget, something in between if you're in between. Similar type things on FanDuel. So we're going to go through the 3 different contest types and really dig deep into understanding how to create lineups specifically designed for each of these contest types. Now, before I get into all of that, the first thing is, if you like this content, you're watching this on my YouTube channel, you're listening, hopefully you're watching this because there's a lot of visual going on here. And I didn't even have my visuals open here, but there's a lot of visuals that will be going on here. So hopefully you're watching this with me. If you are, Please like and subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content. Maybe wait till the end, see if you like what I had to say, but it does support the channel and it lets me know that you're watching, and it gives me motivation to do more of these types of videos. Please do that. And if you're not currently a DFS Army subscriber and you're watching this, it is important for me to let you know that we are getting ready for NFL season right now. Get over to dfsarmy.com, sign up as a VIP. You can use my personal promo code GEEK, and you'll get 20% off DFS Army VIP, which covers everything we do, all sports, optimizer, research stations, tools, ownership projections, a lot of the tools that you'll need to implement these strategies. We have high-level projections. All of that is right there. Go to dfsarmy.com, sign up with promo code GEEK. And get ready for the football season. We will be together all football season. You will get sick of me by the end, probably. All right, and now the other thing I want to show you before we get into this, because I like to, I see a lot of videos on YouTube, and I like to kind of show credibility one way or the other, and the only real way I can do it is by showing you my profile on Roto Grinders. You should understand that I am currently the 109th ranked tournament player of the year. I am number 84 last season on the NFL leaderboard. This is my sport. This is what I do. I love tournaments. I love to attack NFL. I like other sports as well, but this is my specialty. So hopefully this gives you at least somewhat of a idea that the advice that I am going to be discussing, the strategies, come from a place of knowledge. Maybe you don't think so. Maybe you think I sound like an idiot. Okay. But at least I showed you that. There you go. Credible person, hopefully. Now, let's get into it. Cash games versus 3-max versus tournament. We're going to start with cash games. Now, we already talked about what a cash game is. How do we construct a lineup for our cash games? The key to cash games is locking in points at the least volatile positions. We want to lock in the points where we can. We also want to save money where we can in the more volatile positions. So the most secure points, fantasy point position is the running back position for NFL. The reason it's the most secure is because running backs have a set number of touches they'll get every single game. And if you're a starting running back, you have a pretty good idea. This person will get a certain number of touches. Now, anything can happen. Players get injured or players have a bad game. Shit happens. It's always going to happen. But the bust rate for running backs is much lower than other position groups. And the floor for these guys that get a lot of touches is much higher. So in your cash game lineup construction, one of the first things we really want to do is pay for secure fantasy points. That almost always starts with studs at the running back positions. We also want to use running back in the flex because, again, running backs are much more likely as an overall basis, not only to get lots of touches, therefore lots of opportunities for fantasy point scoring, but also more goal line opportunities, more opportunities to score touchdowns. So in our cash lineup, our focus needs to be 3 running backs, regardless FanDuel, Draftkings. It's even more dramatic on FanDuel quite clearly than on DraftKings, but we want to get 3 running backs on our team, all with very high floors where we can hopefully lock in 25 to 30 points, 20 to 30 points, depending on the site each, and kind of lock in a floor in this cash lineup that we're putting together where it's between 60 to 90 fantasy points across our 3 running backs, hopefully. That often means things like paying up for Christian McCaffrey if you can, or finding other stud running backs in elite situations that are cheap enough to afford a number of them. Week 1 already on DraftKings and FanDuel for the 2020 season, there are lots of these types of players, even in the 7K range, the Joe Mixons, and just guys that are going to be in a good spot. Ideally, with your running back position, especially in cash, we want players from teams that are favored or in spots that will be close games. High scoring is all good as well, but we know that favored running backs, we want running backs on teams that are playing from ahead. So, getting involved with massive underdogs, and that running back, even if he's cheap, is not the best situation in the world. We want favorites if we can get them, or running backs that are bust proof, game flow proof. There are certain running backs that will stay in the game even if their team is down. Other ones will not. I'll give an example. Josh Jacobs comes out of the game when the Raiders are behind. He is not a safe floor running back. He's a running back that is a front-running running back. He needs the team to be winning in order to be in the game. On the flip side, a player like Christian McCaffrey or Austin Eckler will be in there regardless of the situation. So Saquon Barkley's on that level too. He's in there regardless. So we want running backs that are game flow safe. Very, very important in our cash games. Number 2, in cash games, don't worry about ownership. It doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite of mattering. If you see players, now DFS Army provides our members high-level player projection, ownership projection, not just player projections, ownership projections, right? A lot of people just ignore it. They don't understand what these are used for. Ownership projections will identify the chalk plays. Now, you might say, oh, should I fade the chalk? I always get these questions. Dude, you don't even know what you're saying. In cash games, we embrace the chalk. And actually, running back chalk is pretty embraceable across all formats. But in cash games, we embrace the chalk. These players are chalk for a reason. The term chalk meaning highly owned across tournaments and even higher owned in cash games. Sometimes a player is so chalky, they're what we refer to in cash games as a free square. Your free square will be a massively underpriced player that is thrust into a starting role for their team due to midweek injury or something that wasn't accounted for in the salary algorithm. So when, it's midweek and Leonard Fournette is traded away from the Jaguars, he's no longer there, and the Jaguars announced that Raquel Armstead is now the starting running back for this team this week, and he's priced $4K that week, and they have a matchup against a really, really crappy team where the Jaguars are still favored. Raquel Armstead becomes what we call a free square. He's so cheap, he's going to get a ton of touches. Now, the scenario I just described is what I call good chalk, right? Good chalk. Running back, team is favored still, great matchup, thrust into a starting role, and a player who has delivered fantasy production for us in the past over his career with a relatively secure workload, massively underpriced. There's a second version of that, bad chalk, which would be a player that is in a similar position, but maybe in a terrible matchup against a really good team as an underdog against a team that's great against the run. Think like Tampa last season when they were so great against the run, and some team that they're playing against maybe gets a running back injury and some really, really low level backup running back who might be part of a tandem. There was a few situations like that with the Lions last year as well, where some tandem style running back became chalk, but they don't catch passes, and they're really only going to get 10 or 12 touches. Bad chalk. So, but we want to embrace the good chalk in our cash games, and you'll see it by ownership projections. Play the best values. That sounds simple to say, but what I mean by that is, if, again, in cash games, we can trust elite projection models, right? At DFS Army, we believe our projection model is the best in the industry. So when you're playing your cash games, you don't want to deviate too far from projections, but you do need to pay attention to make sure that the lineup construction itself is correct for cash games. In other words, I don't believe in simply hitting optimize on your optimizer and playing whatever lineup pops up. That's not the best approach, because the optimizer will squeeze together the lineup with the highest expected total fantasy point projection, mean fantasy point projection, which sounds great. But I just said here, we want to emphasize stud running backs over stud wide receivers. So if the optimizer that you're using is kicking out Julio Jones in essentially what is the cash lineup or the top optimal, you might say, you know something? I like Julio, good player. Sometimes he has big games, but he is a wide receiver. It's a very volatile position. I'd rather spend that money on a running back. So you need to work the optimizer, but also embrace the projections. We want to play the best values. On the DFS Army Optimizer, value is indicated by a column that says FPTS /$ or fantasy points per dollar. We want the highest number. Players with the highest fantasy points per dollar projection are the best values on the slate. Those are the players that we are, through our handicapping model, essentially our player projection, we've identified value against what is essentially the handicapping model of the daily sites, which is the salary they place on the player. The salary that DraftKings or FanDuel or not Super Draft, but Fantasy Draft or the multiplier that Super Draft places on the player, those are their handicap. We're trying to look for value against them. Next up, save salary at the more volatile position groups, wide receiver, tight end, and defense. This is very, very important. You can also save salary at quarterback, which is a high floor position group. So there's actually an extra one. But definitely in my cash games, the first thing I look to do is find the cheapest viable defense. This is my starting point for building a lineup. I look at the defenses that week and I say, which one here is the cheapest viable? Why? Because it's really hard to predict defensive performances. Most of them are going to give you like a 4, a 3, a 5, a 6. Yes, will there be some defenses each week that produce a massive score, a 15, a 25? Sure, but are we able to easily identify those? No. So the best method is just to use a really cheap one, spend the salary on that running back position, buy the fantasy points. I'll give you an example. Let's say Bears defense in a great matchup, 4K this week. At home against a bad team. Another defense, Arizona, 2K. On the road against San Francisco, against a great team. Two defenses, $2K, $2,000 apart in terms of salary. We know that the defense position is wildly volatile, one of the most volatile position groups, especially in terms of special scores that are well above the mean. We're better off spending down, saving the $2,000, and then moving up from what might be a mediocre running back to Christian McCaffrey, where we can lock in 30 plus fantasy points. Or another player of that caliber where we know we're pretty much locking in 25 to 30 fantasy points. If we can get 3 stud running backs, again, lock in 25 to 30 each, we're at 90. We get even a pay down at quarterback, gets us another 20 points. We're at 110. Now, all we have to do is piece together a defense, 3 wide receivers, and a tight end that total up maybe 40 fantasy points, so less than 10 a pop, and we should hit the cash line most weeks on DraftKings, and something similar for FanDuel based on their system. So we want to buy and secure fantasy points from the least volatile positions, while at the same time saving money at the position groups, which are much more volatile and less likely to essentially lock in fantasy points for us. We're going to do something very opposite for tournaments. So this is why this stuff is really, really important to understand cash games versus tournaments, how different they are. We'll get to that. Again, I talked about cash games eating all the good chalk. Don't be afraid of embrace the chalk. Eat the chalk. Chew it up. It's good. Tastes good. Gets rid of your antacid too. You wanted the chalk. If you're spicy food, get a little chalk in there. Gets rid of that antacid. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Eat the chalk in cash. Use ownership projections as a guide to the best plays. If you want to keep it even simpler, because you're not smart enough to look at the fucking fantasy points per dollar projection and understand that that's a measure of value, then just look at ownership. Sort each position group by ownership, and it will reveal the best plays in that position group in cash games. It's not hard. It's not hard. You take that information and then you translate it to what I just talked about in terms of how you construct your lineup. You want to construct the lineup with an emphasis on the running back position, locking in the points. Secondarily, the quarterback position, although sometimes paying down a quarterback is the move because you're going to get points paying down. Maybe pay all the way down to fit that extra running back in there. Do we want to play Lamar Jackson? He's going to put up 30 each week, but you're going to have to pay $2K more than the next cheapest quarterback to get him. So that's always a decision point we're going to have to make every single week. Do I want to play Lamar? Only if I have value at running back that allows me to. Next up, get a top-end projection system, DFS Army. Promo code GEEK if you're not already a member. And trust the projections. You're not good enough on your own to figure a lot of this stuff out. You can't just look at the... you might be able to. But for cash games, if you're paying for a projection system, you might as well take advantage of it. Use it. Again, that does not mean click, optimize, print money. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. But what it does mean is once you've identified the various players, position groups where the value exists, now we can look at it and again, apply what we just talked about. Lock in the points, stud up at running back. Make sure that every player in your cash lineup has a high floor. We want targets and touches over, they are king. Targets and touches are the most important thing because they create floor. The way we measure and create projection systems is we say every time this running back touches the football, they score on average point something fantasy points. So the more times they touch the football, the more on average they will score. That does not mean that it's a lock that a player projected for 20 touches in a game is going to put up a monster number, but he probably has a pretty high floor. And, you know, we do our best. We don't know what these people are going to actually do, so we put ourselves in the best position to win. Shit happens, that's okay, but we want to put ourselves in the best position to win. And again, similar note, control for positional volatility in your final lineup. Again, meaning we want to focus on those position groups that are less volatile, paying most of our salary to those. And then hopefully we've identified wide receivers, tight ends that we think have a lot of upside. I mean, week one, there's a lot of that going on. Week one, we'll talk about that when we do the actual breakdowns of players. Here we're talking philosophical approach. Okay. Next up, we're going to talk about single entry or 3 max tournaments. How do I change my lineup construction approach? We just made a cash lineup. We talked about how to put it together. We're going to pay up at certain positions. We're going to pay up at running back. We're going to get our volatility down. We're going to get our floor higher and hopefully do enough to cross the cash line. Hopefully we pick really great pay down options at the wide receiver position and at the tight end position and at the defense position, which is really what you need. A lot of people will approach cash games the same. So it's about hitting on those other plays that kind of propel you through and over the cash line most of the time. One more note about cash. You do not need to build correlation here. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong, for example, with the QB WR stack if those are the 2 players that, you know, show a lot of value for their position groups. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not against it, which is there's a common misnomer about cash games that you should not have a quarterback with their wide receiver or their tight end. That's incorrect. There's nothing wrong with that. You just don't need to force it. I usually actually will have some level of correlation of that sort in my cash lineup. But again, it's not necessary to force it. If I played Lamar Jackson week 1 and I didn't play him with anybody, okay. I'll take the 30, even if one of his players, if I'll give an example. Let's say I want to play Lamar Jackson. He's 8K week 1, over 8K. Now I say, I got to stack him. And I want to stack him with Mark Andrews, his tight end. The tight end 7,200. An 8K, a 7,200 tight end does not suit what I'm trying to do in cash games. So it doesn't work. Even if I think Mark Andrews has the best matchup and it's great and whatever, I'm not paying 7,200 for a tight end in cash. So that doesn't work. And maybe I look at Marquise Brown and say, well, this guy's just a very volatile wide receiver week to week. I can't count on him getting, 7 or 9 targets. So that's okay. Don't need to stack in cash. But there's nothing wrong if you do it in the right situation. Both players need to just be the best plays. Okay, single entry 3 max. This is my bread and butter. These types of contests are the most winnable. These type of contests are contest types that you can be successful in week after week. You can be profitable in frequently. I would say as frequently as cash. So if our goal at the start of a season in our cash games is to win, let's say there's a 17-week season and our goal is to win 12, to be profitable 12 out of the 17 weeks. I think that's an aggressive goal, but I think it's achievable. With single entry 3 max, that way, I'd probably have a goal of trying to be profitable in these, 10 or 12 weeks also. Maybe a little less than cash, but like about 10 weeks. It's not that different in terms of your ability to be profitable, especially if we approach lineup construction in single entry 3 max the correct way. Now, again, what is a single entry 3 max game? There are tournaments. They're not as top heavy or as large. This is how I approach them. They're not as top heavy or large as what we would call a GPP, mass multi-entry style GPP, like a Millie Maker or any number of big name contests that you will see. Usually the big name contest will say something like X amount of dollars to first place for the winner. That's how you know you're dealing with a mass multi-entry contest. Single entry and 3 max, there's a lot of different types, but the ones I like to focus on, I like to have fewer entrants and require less perfection in order to win. I'm going to give a few examples in a moment, but I just want to go over some of these bullet points that we have for single entry and 3 max contest. How do we differ from our cash game? Well, to me, single entry and 3 max should be a hybrid off of your cash game approach. We do want to have correlation in our single entry or 3 max lineup at the very, very bare minimum. And this is the bare minimum. We want a quarterback with one of his pass catchers in this type of contest. That's the bare minimum. I don't mind a quarterback with pass catcher. Bring it back with a player from the opposite team as well, if that makes sense. We're not going to force it. But if that makes sense, I don't mind a mini game stack. I don't even mind a mini team stack where you might have a quarterback, a pass catcher, and a running back from the same team, or a quarterback and 2 pass catchers from the same team. Although more often than not, I would save that for the mass multi-entry contest, but I don't mind it. In single entry and 3 max contests, one very, very important thing to note is that you can figure out what most of the field is going to do, especially on higher dollar entry contests. People that enter these contests tend to either just throw their cash lineup into it or throw a very, very similar lineup to cash, a very chalky cash type approach into these. The reason they do that is because they're afraid to lose. Usually these contest types are a little bit more expensive per entry than what you certainly. If I was a player that is willing to max out a $20 Millie Maker, then if I'm doing a single entry 3 max contest, it might be a $500 entry. If I'm maxing out the Millie Maker, I'm not putting a lot of effort into a $20 single entry against 200 people. That's not anything because you're already willing to throw away 150 lineups at $20 a pop. So you have a bigger bankroll and tolerance for loss. But if I'm someone who plays quarter games and I'm putting my one big entry into a single entry contest, that might be a $20 contest. That's why I say it doesn't matter how much it is. The contest type is much more important, and approaching the contest type with the right approach and lineup construction is much more important. So how do we construct our lineup for single entry and 3 max? We want to try to understand the approach that the field will take and find a sharp pivot without trying to be overly contrarian. What does that mean? Some weeks, we might find that there's a player who's going to be super chalk as a flex play. Maybe it's a running back. Maybe it's what I would call a bad chalk running back. Maybe it's a guy who is starting for a team, but we don't know if he's going to get the full workload. We don't know how much of a share, but there's no other real values on the slate. And it's just very obvious that everybody's going to play him. We want to look at that and say, you know what? Maybe I can construct my lineup differently. Maybe that running back is min salary, and that's why everybody wants to play him, right? And because of that, everybody's lineup is going to look very similar, where they can afford, a couple of pay down options and then a bunch of studs elsewhere. Maybe you might look at that and say, you know what? Everybody's playing this, and because of that, all of these wide receivers that are normally not owned in this style of contest, these high dollar wide receivers, became chalk. Everybody, because there's this sort of maybe not the best chalk, like a bad chalk running back or wide receiver or something floating out there that everybody's talking about, and you see the ownership projection, it's going up throughout the week, and you're like, oh man, everybody's going to go nuts here playing, Benny Snell. Or I remember, again, the running backs for Detroit were the best. Or last year, there was a couple games where I actually mentioned a scenario that I remember where Miles Sanders was going to start, and we like Miles Sanders as a player, but it was going up against the Patriots, and the Patriots defense was so good, and it was like, oh man, Miles Sanders is going to be chalk this week, but it's up against the Patriots. Do we really want to go crazy with that? But he was an under 5K guy on DraftKings, and everybody played him. You want to find a way to differentiate yourself in your single entry and 3 max without being ridiculous. The field zigs, you zag. So how do we do it? First, we have to determine who the chalk is. We have to figure out, okay, what's the most common way that people are going to construct their lineups this week? And actually, I have a great example that I'm going to pull up here. Last season, I was in the King of the Beach DraftKings tournament. This was a 75 entry tournament. It was, here's the date, November 24th, a 75 entry tournament with a massive prize to first place. But essentially, it replicated a single entry, top heavy, small field tournament. So what I'm going to do is take a look at a similar tournament from that particular week, because they don't have the Millie Maker here on the results database. Credit to Roto Grinders here for their results database. We like it. We're using it here for this purpose. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up a similar style of contest, and here it is. The 300K Game Changer, which is a 213 entry contest, a little bit larger. 50K to first, but the dollar amount per entry is similarly prohibitive to the point where your entrants will be fearful of losing money as much as they are aggressively trying to win the tournament. When you put a $1,500 entry in, the vast majority of people, and now, again, you might say, well, I'm never going to do that. The vast majority of people, their first thought is, I don't want to lose all my money. So I don't want to get too crazy with it, right? Then after that, we might say, all right, when also I'd like to, I want to try to win this. But first thing is I want to get in the cash line because it's $1,500 and the cash line is $3,000. I want my money back. Now, if we look at the results database here, I want to make some big notes here. The winner of this contest absolutely destroyed the field and scored 20 fantasy points more than second place. This is relevant because what I'm trying to convey here is these are winnable content. You do not need a nuts score. You don't need the perfect lineup to win this. You just need a good lineup. And you need to have a little bit of differentiation. Now, I bet you this lineup, I don't know how to show them. I would assume this lineup does not have Julio Jones. So, all right, let's take a look at what the field did first. On the right-hand side, and I remember this contest again. I was in the King of the Beach for this. I finished in 14th place, made 15 grand. It was awesome. And I spent, the reason I'm choosing this slate is because I spent so much time thinking about single entry approaches. That's all I thought of that entire week. What is the field going to do? What is the field's lineup going to look like? How can I differentiate it? How can I differentiate my lineup? So in this particular week, Atlanta was going up against Tampa. And the common theme was, for last season, was play quarterbacks and wide receivers against Tampa. They can't stop them. Tampa was also a really, really great scoring offense. So every single week, what would happen, and actually that was a bigger reason why teams did well against Tampa, because Tampa was really doing a good job of scoring themselves. So teams would always be in comeback mode against the Falcons. So Matt Ryan was the clear and obvious chalk quarterback play that week. And look what he did, 9 fantasy points. Isn't that always the way? Now, I knew going into the contest that Matt Ryan to Julio Jones would be the most popular stack for multiple reasons. Number one, we have ownership projections that clearly showed Julio Jones the highest projected ownership of any wide receiver by far. Secondarily, Matt Ryan's ownership was projected to be massively high. And the game had the highest game total on the entire slate. So there was a lot of reasons why it was extremely obvious that everybody was going to be on Matt Ryan to Julio Jones. Now, the first thing I thought to myself was, Julio Jones chalk is bad chalk. He's a volatile player. He's very, very expensive. When you pay up this high for a wide receiver and they don't perform, your lineup is dead. And that's what happened to the 50% of Julio Jones lineups in the contest that I was in. And I'm going to assume in this contest, and I'm going to show you right now that is the case. Let's take a look at the lineup that Rowe put together that won. There's no Julio in here. Look at the construction. What did he do? Instead of taking Julio and the Atlanta side, he went with Chris Godwin and the Tampa side. Genius. Why didn't everybody else do that? It was the highest projected slate. Jameis Winston also small, but it was the highest projected game. Everybody was going to be on the Atlanta side. He did the opposite, led to the win. If you look down the list, here you could see a player. Here you can understand why the gap happened between the 24 and the 15 and first and second. Here, a player who actually used Julio Jones, but he differentiated with a Mayfield Jarvis Landry lineup. And between Landry and DJ Moore's incredible days, he was able to get past the fact that he used the crappy Julio Jones play. If Rich 723 had the balls to fade the Julio chalk, he could have won the 50K. Secondarily, let's go back to ownership because I want to talk about this lineup. Note that at 11% ownership, Jarvis Landry put up a 40-point score. Baker Mayfield was a fairly chalky. Baker Mayfield was the second chalk in this contest. But again, everybody played him with Odell Beckham Jr. Now, Odell had a pretty fine game. but he was priced a little bit higher, and Jarvis Landry had a much better game. So secondarily, one of the things I talk about in my bullet points here for single entry or 3-max, switch. If the field zigs, you should zag. Is Matt Ryan to Julio Jones chalk? Yes. Still want to play Matt Ryan? How about Matt Ryan to Calvin Ridley? Baker Mayfield going to be chalk to Odell Beckham? How about Baker Mayfield to Jarvis Landry? Do something a little different without being stupid. If let's say this was a team that had a running back that was usable, which wasn't Atlanta last season, let's be real. But let's say we were talking about the Baker Mayfield situation. Everybody playing Baker Mayfield. Second chalkiest quarterback on the slate. Well, what if we look at that game and said, Nick Chubb is on. If that game is highly projected, which it was, Nick Chubb is on that team. Why don't we play Chubb? We're going to zag while everybody's playing Mayfield to Odell Beckham. What if we play the running back, Chubb or Kareem Hunt? Well, let's take a look at what those guys did. Not that the results are that important, but this is just to give an example of how you can switch up what you're doing. Let's see if I can find Nick Chubb in here. Of course not. Actually, I think I can find him. I'll jump over to the Millie Maker on this slate, and you'll see, I believe Nick Chubb actually destroyed this slate. First place. Nick Chubb. There you go. So everybody was 28 fantasy points. Not destruction, but very low ownership play, all things considered. Baker Mayfield much more heavily owned. And here you see in the Millie Maker, all of the ownerships are actually tamped down quite a little bit. But here's the winner of the $1 million for that week. And, Landry Mayfield stack. You got some low ownership going on. Played the chalk running back here with Derrick Henry, one of them. Got some low ownership in other spots. Got a nice score out of his defense. So just going back to this for the example purposes, when we do a single entry or 3-entry max, we don't have to get crazy. We don't have to start using players that are, no one wants, that are in the worst projected spots. Look for players from the third or fourth best game. Or if you're going to go, but in terms of total projection, and if you're going to go with one of the higher, chalkier games of the week, the highest projected total, you'll know every week who everybody's on, which game is exciting everybody. Look for what they're doing. If everybody's going to play the quarterback, wide receivers, get on the running back spot. Do something. If people are playing quarterback to what WR1, maybe WR2 spot. These aren't worse plays. The WR2 is just as good as the WR1. It's not the ultimate, but we want to get leverage on the field. If I play Julio and Matt Ryan in this contest and Julio goes crazy, I didn't gain anything. 51% of the field also played. So that's a scared move. And this is what I'm trying to emphasize. When you play scared, you don't win in daily fantasy. The scared move was to play Julio Jones. And shit, during the King of the Beat, I was scared too. I was like, man, should I play him? Like, you know what? Fuck that. I don't care. YOLO. I ain't playing him. I'm not going to play scared. Especially high dollar chalk, because you play scared and you play Julio like 51% of the field did here. You gain nothing if you're right. Just kept up with the field. If you're wrong, you're dead. So the upside of the play, the EV is just not there. It's a minus EV situation. Because even if you're right, you don't get ahead. Like if you play Julio, you play scared, in this type of contest, he's in a great spot. I get it. Going to be chalk, 52% owned. That's crazy high ownership. You do it, you get nowhere. Don't play scared. Doesn't mean you have to do a stupid play. Play Calvin Ridley. What did Calvin Ridley do? Well, he did pretty good. 22 points at thousands less in salary. So you play, you don't play scared. Scared money, don't make money. That's how you tax single entry GPP. Correlation. First, understanding what the field is going to do, and then making your pivots, but you don't have to get silly with it. You don't have to get silly for the milli. We'll get silly for the milli in the next portion. But right here, you don't have to get silly for the milli at all. You just want to be a little bit unique without being stupid. I believe that week the Browns played the Dolphins. I'm not 100%, but I believe that's what it was. So while everybody was focused on Atlanta, Tampa as the primary game, Miami, Cleveland was like the third best projected or the second best, but in the single entry contest, everybody went for the big one. That game had less ownership. So the right move was to play the second highest projected game. Just get off the super chalk. Or even if you were in the Falcons game, everybody was focused on the Atlanta side when the correct move was to mess with the Tampa side. Because there was no great reason to be on Atlanta versus Tampa. Oh, Tampa's on the road. Atlanta, it didn't matter. Do one little zag, and that is enough to propel you in this type of contest. Again, I'm going to show the results here because I want you to see the scores. These are not massive scores. 170 is what you could do most weeks in your cash lineup. Like you have a pretty good cash week, you're putting up 175, 180. These are not crazy high scores. Again, Millie Maker, I'm going to show you that in a second. But look, this guy won 50K. This person won 30K with a 183. Now you might say, well, 30K, I don't got 1,500. It doesn't matter. If you did $15, that would be 3,000. It's a shitload of money. $3,000 or 300? I don't know. 300, 3,000. What's the difference? The point is, it's a good ROI. Let's see. 30 is 20. 30K is 20x on $1,500, right? So 20x on $15 is $300. All right, so it's less money, but still, it doesn't matter. I don't know. My brain's not working. This is live. It's a live stream. I don't remember. All right. 20x. 20x is 20x is my point. 20x is 20x. You make 20x in dollars, fuck great. It's doable. Single entry. All right. Let's move on to the next contest type. And now remember, if you're still with me, number one, I just want to compliment you. You've stayed with me. Most people, the minute I start talking about strategy, they glaze off and they start. They lose concentration. They're not interested. Who to locks, Geek? That's all they want to know. So if you're still here, I want to compliment you on your desire to really improve your game. And that's what I'm all about all the time. I'm trying to learn every single day, improve my game, because I fucking put my money on this stuff and I want to make the money. I want to win the contest. I want to feel the glory of it. I love the glory. I want to have the excitement. I want my blood to boil. That's why we study this strategy, and that's why we try to do this stuff. So my compliments to you for sticking with me this far. I believe that because you're here with me now, it's going to lead to good things for you this season because you're giving a shit. You're thinking strong about strategy, how to approach your lineup construction, and all of that. And I think it's going to work out for you. You're going to win all the monies. I believe in you. So, next up, mass multi-entry top-heavy tournaments. This is the sexy stuff, guys. This is the Millie Maker. This is the 50K to first. the 100K to first. This is what we bust out the Domination Station Optimizer to help us with. DraftKings and FanDuel have contest types for every budget. Top heavy mass multi-entry GPP, that could be a quarter game, a nickel game on FanDuel. Could be a 50-cent mini max or a $2 mini max on Draft. It doesn't have to be a $20 milli make. You don't have to spend $3,000. Get in there for $300, $2 mini max. Get in there for $37.50 on a 50-cent game. It's not about how much money you put into it. It's not for the rich. As a matter of fact, I strongly recommend you do not just start diving into $5 or $9 or $15 or $20 entry contests of this type. Don't do that. If you're going to mass multi-enter, start small, win some tournaments, prove that you can win one. Then move up. Prove that your approach to it is good enough to win one. Or don't do it. Stick to 3 entry. We could do that. We don't need all that much. We have our tools. Stick to cash games, 3 entry, the ladder, the DFS Army ladder, which we talk about all the time. You don't have to mass multi-enter. But if you're going to, which I like to do, I don't focus on it as the only thing I do each week, but I like to do it. You better do it right. And the number one thing you should understand about mass multi-entry is win or die. Okay? This is something that not a lot of people understand. When I mass multi-enter, here's what my expectation is over the course of an NFL season. This is more important even, this is critical. Understand what you're doing. This is a very, very volatile approach because if you don't win and if you don't come in kind of top 5 in these things, you're going to lose money. And it's hard to come in top 5 against 100,000, 200,000. Week 1, we have 900,000, a million entrants in some of these contests. You're not coming in the top 10. Or if you do, you had about a 10 in a million chance of it. Now, to understand those odds, you have to get that, like, you can max enter this contest every day for your entire lifetime and not skew the odds to your favor for finishing first or a top 5. You'll never have entered enough lineups to get there. So it's an extremely rare situation to even get a top 10 in this size contest. So if we're just relying on probability, so what we do is we skew the odds in our favor with sharp lineup construction techniques. Now, I'm going to give a little example of something, but before I do that, I want to mention, if you're a DFS Army subscriber, you have access to the Shark Autopsy book, How to Win the DraftKings Millie Maker, written by our own Adam Burns, a.k.a. Burnsy, a man who is an engineer, a math genius, and a guy who, without max multi-entering, has finished top 20 in the DraftKings Millie Maker multiple times, at least twice or 2 or 3 times last season alone. He explains the techniques he used, player selection, a lot of high-level techniques that I can't get into in this video. So if you're a DFS Army subscriber, we're ahead of the season. Now is the time you should be reading that. Go to dfsarmy.com. If you're not a subscriber and you click on the link for that book, there are ways to get a free month membership where you'll get access to the book, all kinds of stuff. So just click around the site and you'll find it, and you should be able to find your way into a free month of DFS Army, our free offer. There are ways. We want to get you this book so you can read it and have a chance when you attack these contests. But my number one rule for top-heavy GPPs, correlation is king. Try to get as much correlation as possible into each lineup without going overboard. I'm going to show you a graphic here momentarily, put together by TJ Hernandez, 4for4 on Twitter. I pulled it off the Twitter. You'll see it. Credit to TJ. It's just a good graphic. I mean, it's nothing proprietary there, but it's a good graphic that will emphasize this point. But before I get into that, it's going to show you what the lineups look like that won all these tournaments last year. But before we get into that, team stacks, game stacks, secondary stacks. What is a team stack? A team stack is when I combine a quarterback with one or more players from his team. We already know that. It's correlation. in tournaments, in order to win a tournament, I need a multi-standard deviation unit event. I need each player on my lineup to score at least one and hopefully 2 standard deviation units above their mean projection if I'm going to take down the million. Okay, I'm going up against 900,000 other lineups. It's not easy to do. Special things need to happen at every point along the way for your team. But if we're looking at a 1 in 1 million shot at something, we need to skew the odds in our favor. And I'm going to explain how, in this next step, important ownership is in this discussion. Ownership is critical. If a player at a volatile position, is going to be massively owned in the Millie Maker, just fade it. Don't have FOMO, just fade it. Fade the highest projected game of the week. More often than not, that game is going to produce a ton of fantasy points. That's fine. If you want to play it, try to find a different way to play it than the field. I'm going to talk about Bobby Wow, a.k.a. Bobby Klinkert, a.k.a. the fucking GOAT, okay? And his $1 million win with DFS Army last season. And actually, I'm going to bring it up here on TJ's chart. So this is a chart from TJ Hernandez, at TJ Hernandez of 444. And it's just a quick look at what the stacks were that won the tournaments each week of the 2009 fantasy football season. And this is important because note what's going on in every single lineup here. Primary stacks, secondary stacks. Some are team stacks, week 1. Other ones are massive game stacks, QB, WR, WRTE. That's a QB with 3 pass catchers and the opposing running back. And the secondary stack in there, running back defense, running back opposing wide receiver. Let me explain what these things are. Last season, we built into the domination station, Optimizer. We had done this research, and if you go and look at my history, or if you're a DFS Army subscriber, you click on Basic Training NFL, you'll see my correlation, NFL correlation videos, where we explained that looking back through years and years of results in these contests, we saw a massive consistency in what wins tournaments. And the most important thing is to make sure that your lineup is correlated as much as possible. Now, that just sounds like buzzwords, but it's important to understand why. Look at how many players were correlated in most of these weeks. Week 1 was the least. I remember DraftKings. That happened. And for me, it was an anomaly more than anything else. But week 1, it was just 2 players correlated. Week 2 already, we had 5 correlated players. One team stack, and then a secondary stack. Now, why is it called secondary? Because this is not part of the same game that the quarterback, wide receiver, tight end are from. This is just a different game with wide receiver, and I don't really consider wide receiver opposing defense a stack. So you know what, I'm gonna leave that off. But it's a little correlated. I guess we'd call it. There's some correlation there, not much. QBWR, RB defense. That our running back defense is a very common stack we use. Quarterback, wide receiver, of course. Here you have a game stack: quarterback, wide receiver, opposing wide receiver, and then a secondary stack. So these 2 players are from a different game: running back, and then the opposite team tight end. Now, understand, when we discovered this, when you look at the data and it was discovered about secondary stacks especially, a lot of the time, those people were not purposefully putting that together. It was just something that kept coming up. When you looked at the winning lineups, you're like, oh shit, it's not just a primary game stack, or it's not just a primary team stack. There's another stack in there, a little mini stack. We'll say from a different game. Now, let me explain why this works. But before I actually explain why this works, I want to give you a task that you're not going to do, but I'm going to give you a task. Go to your bookmaker. Go to the Draftkings book, FanDuel book, Vinny Goombat's website, if you have a bookmaker, legal book, overseas book, where the hell you do. and try to parlay the following. Try to parlay week 1, Aaron Rodgers throws for 3 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers passes for over 300 yards. Devontae Adams catch for over 75 yards. Devontae Adams scores a touchdown. And try to parlay that all together. And the reason I'm telling you to do it is because the bookmaker will not allow you to do that. They won't allow you to make correlated parlays. If you have Aaron Rodgers throws for 300 yards, you're not allowed to also parlay that with one of Aaron Rodgers' pass catchers surpassing a yardage or getting a touchdown. Because the bookmaker knows that that is how you skew the odds in your favor. So they don't allow it. You can't do it. What more do you need to know? The bookmaker, okay, their analytics, their data is better than everybody else's, right? They have big money on the line. They don't allow you to correlate. Listen to the theme song of the show. Do you even correlate, bro? They don't allow it because that's how you skew the odds in your favor. So I'm going to give you a secondary task to understand. We're talking about mass multi-entry contests and how to win them. I guarantee you that none of these lineups that won $1 million on DraftKings, none of these lineups, including Bobby Wow's lineup, week 4, motherfucker, none of these lineups that won the $1 million was the perfect lineup for that week. In NFL football, daily fantasy football, no one achieves the perfect lineup. Now, this is the reason this is important is because a lot of people who want to argue against correlation will come to me after the fact and say, and I see this at MLB and I see this in other sports all the time, and people just want to argue or they just don't want to believe, or I don't know. As a matter of fact, I think it's actually very small-minded, but nonetheless, people will come to me and say, well, I saw it once where a lineup that wasn't correlated at all won a million maker. Okay. But are you going to hit that lineup? No. Here's what you have to understand. When we're correlating the lineup, what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, all right, if this game puts up a massive number, if this quarterback I'm using goes bananas and is throwing wide, touchdowns are happening like giving out like hotcakes. I want to be on that because that has a better than 0% chance of happening. And if it does happen, it's going to lift the entirety of my lineup. So there's a chance that I get the right combination in that sort of game where I hit the quarterback and the 2 pass catchers that go nuts for him. The opposite team is scoring, so I got their running back and I have their wide receiver on my team. The whole game went crazy, and no one else played it because everybody thinks it's too many from one game. We're trying to limit. So when we add multiple correlations, we're trying to limit the number of landmines in our lineup. We say, all right, look at week 2 FanDuel Sunday Million. This person had 7 correlated players in their lineup. You got a quarterback, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and 1 running back. Here's your second running back and your second wide receiver. The only thing this person had, he had a flex and a defense that were not necessarily tied into these 2 games. These 2 games went off. That carried this team to victory. Another important note is if you look at the lineups of the top-ranked players in the world, I don't even consider myself that. If you look at the lineups of the players that most frequently win tournaments in NFL, you will see that this is generally how they construct their lineups as well. They always do, at minimum, 3-person stacks, QB, 2 pass catchers. A lot of times it's 4-person or even 5-person stacks. They just load up on game stacks. And if they're sharp, they'll have secondary stacks in their lineups as well. Again, one of the beautiful things for DFS Army subscribers is we have built in to our optimizer, the system that will force a secondary stack into each lineup if you want. You can determine how many game stacks you want, how many team stacks. We have extreme control. You will see that in a later video where I break that. You could see it in my old tutorial. I'll have a fresh one this season, kind of breaking down how to use the Domination Station Optimizer. I'm waiting for some of the numbers to populate for week one, ownerships and shit like that before I do it, because I want to do it based around week one. But there will be a full blast tutorial on how to use the Domination Station Optimizer to create low-owned, highly correlated lineups. It's designed to do it. We build the tool to build lineups that look like these winners. That's why we produced $1 million winner. That's why we produced multiple tournament takedowns last season, every season. Of course, the showdowns, no one wins more showdowns than we do with our optimizer. It's because I used the tool. I built it for my game, and everybody else can use it also. Great. But I want to win. So I'm sharing the tool that I use. That's what DFS Army subscribers get. Unlike other sites where they share a tool they don't actually use. Let's go back to it. Ownership is critical, guys. I'm going to give you the example of the March Madness contest. And we'll go back. I mean, we could even talk about the Julio ownership situation. Do you really think that you're going to leapfrog the field if on a 50% owned player? You're going to win. If you're right and Julio Jones goes off for 38 fantasy points, you've still now got 500,000 other lineups that you have to have constructed yours better than. So you've created such a barrier for your ability to win. Now, let's say the odds of Julio busting that day, and I'm going to give a wrong odds, 50%. Wide receiver chalk busts at an 80% rate. But let's say I said it was 50% because Julio was in such a great matchup. How's that helpful? I played Julio. 50% of the field played him. He does great. All I'm doing is like I'm still just in the middle of the pack. I didn't separate myself. You're better off as a philosophy, as an approach in mass multi-entry tournaments. Your philosophy should be, I don't give a fuck. If this chalk hits, fine. YOLO, it's not going to hit for me. Because you have to understand and think to yourself that if this chalk hits, you ain't winning shit anyway. All you're doing is probably hitting the cash line with the chalk lineup. Okay, I'm going to give you an example, and it's my favorite example to use. Let me make my face big for this. Heart to heart, guys. Here's my favorite example to use. It's March Madness. You're in a pool with 200 people. Duke is the odds-on favorite. 50-50 odds to win the whole thing. So you're like, I should probably pick Duke as the winner, right? I mean, of course, they're 50-50 odds. The next best team has 25% implied probability, and then the team after that is 10-4. In their implied probabilities. Vegas gives us the implied probabilities of every team. So now you're in this pool with 200 people. Should you pick Duke? Well, Duke is the odds-on favorite. Of course I should pick him. No. Why? Because while it's most likely that Duke will win, even if they do win, which is a 50-50 proposition, you're still stuck with a lineup that now has to beat 100 other lineups in order to take down the Monies. So you're left with a 1 in 100 chance of winning. That's assuming the 50-50 proposition that Duke wins the contest. It is suboptimal to play the highest favorite in the March Madness and pick them as the winner. It's a suboptimal move because you're much better off. Let's say Duke loses, wipe out half the field, and now which team did you pick? Did you pick the team that had a 10% implied probability of winning? Did they win? How many other lineups in your contest picked them? 3%? Let's say that team was owned, the 25% implied probability, second favorite, was owned by 35% of people in your contest. Same difference. The leverage isn't there. I'd rather take the team with a 10% chance of winning that was only going to be 2% owned. Why? Because now if they actually win, which is a 10% probability, not bad, 10% chance, I'm in a 200-person contest. So going into the contest, I have, all things being equal, if this was just a blind lottery draw, pick a lot, everybody gets one person picks a winner, I'd have a 1 in 200 or 0.5% chance of winning. But if I take a team that has, if I pick a team that has a 10% chance of winning the tournament, but they're only 3% owned, and they win, well, 3% owned, 10% probability, it increases my odds from 0.5 to 10% hit. I'm one of 6 lineups in there. So it increased my odd from 0.5% to 1 or 2% or 3% chance of winning the whole tournament. And if my team actually wins, if that 10% event happens, I now have, let's say, if there's 3 lineups or 3%, 6 lineups, 3% of lineups, I now have a 33% chance of winning the actual tournament, assuming my team wins. So again, in this example, I picked Duke. 100 other lineups also picked Duke out of 200. Duke wins. That's a 50-50 proposition. Now I'm a 1 in 100 shot of winning because I have to compete with 100 other lineups. I pick Gonzaga, 10% chance of winning. Only 6 lineups chose them to win, even though they had 10%. 20 should have chosen them. Only 6 did. Now they win. I have a 1 in 6 probability of winning the tournament. 10%, 1 in 6 versus 50%, 1 in 100. So when you think about these numbers, the reason I'm emphasizing it is to teach you why you should always be game theory minded when entering a top heavy GPP. The whole goal is to decrease the odds, increase your percentage odds of winning the tournament. And sometimes that requires what feels like suboptimal plays. I don't want to lose you guys, but sometimes that feels like suboptimal plays. Ownership is critical. Avoid wide receiver chalk like the plague. Build heavily correlated lineups. Correlation is king. The games with the highest projected totals will have the highest player ownerships, except that if the chalk hits, you'll lose. Why? Because when we play in these tournaments, we're going to lose money 50% to 60% of the time. Maybe 20% of the time to 30% of the time, we're going to just break even. So my expectation going in is usually that I'll lose 25 to 40% of my entry fees when I enter mass multi-entry. This gets people down. They think they're doing something wrong, but you're not. That's just how it works. It's top heavy. You can't win these every single week. You can't even be profitable in them most weeks. Going to lose money 50 to 60% of the time. You're going to break even 20 to 30% of the time. When do I make money, Kim? Maybe 5 to 10% of the time. For me, maybe there'll be 3 weeks over the course of a season, maybe 4, where my mass multi-entry will be profitable. That includes showdowns. Showdowns will be by the percentage basis, but we have a lot more showdowns to mess with. But it's the same concept. You're going to lose money 70% of the time. Only 20%, 10% of the time, you're going to turn a profit. And the idea is once or twice during the season, if you can bink one or hit a top 10 or hit a first place, it pays for the entire season. You hit a second one, you made a shitload of money that year. Last year, week 1, I took down a showdown on DraftKings where I faded Christian McCaffrey, if you could believe it, in what was a chalk spot. I think it was week 2. I played DJ Moore in the captain position. No Christian McCaffrey in the lineup. Unthinkable. But Christian McCaffrey was going to be 80%, 90% owned. So, you got to do something different if you want to win one of those. You have to believe that low percentage outcomes, as unlikely as they seem, you have to understand that they can happen. And the odds of them happening are generally greater than what we think in our own minds. Don't play scared. Look for let me make this bigger again. Sorry. No more heart to heart. Don't play scared. Look for unlikely scenarios that will be owned at lower probabilities than the probability that scenario hits. One of the things that we have at DFS Army is a leverage stacks tool. We introduced it for MLB this season. We have it for NFL as well, where it will show you the likely ownership of certain stacks versus the probability of that stack being one of the best stacks, and show you where you can get leverage against the field. I don't want to load up on a game with a 39-point fantasy projection, like the Jets, the Bills, or like some defensive battle, two teams that can't score. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying like game stack the 39-point total. But when there's a 54-pointer on the slate, there's nothing wrong with pivoting over to the 47.5, 48.5 point game total that no one's interested in because there's a 55-pointer on the slate, and go to that one. Don't play the chalk. Wide receivers bust massively. Another important tip for top-heavy GPPs is the way we avoid wide receiver chalk is just tying them into our quarterbacks. You'll have so much quarterback-wide receiver correlation that the Julio is not showing up because I'm not playing Matt Ryan. So I get Julio's great projection and whatever, but I don't end up with any of him because not playing Matt Ryan. Week 1, a perfect one. Would play good players that no one's going to play. Week 1, 2020, there's a game, Arizona's going to play against San Francisco at San Francisco, right? No one's going to play Arizona. Can't play Arizona? Geek, are you mad? You can't play Arizona. They're facing San Francisco. San Francisco defense is excellent. So what? That's a situation. Let's look at the game total. Game total, 48 points, 47. It's reasonable. YOLO. I get it. I know. Everybody else also sees San Francisco defense and they don't want to play them. That makes you want to play them. Don't worry about that. Another little player selection tip that's one of my favorites. Here, we're an hour and 18 in, so I'm going to try to end this here. But one of my favorite player selection tips for top-heavy GPPs especially, look for players, stay away from recency bias. Look for players where the recency bias is negative. NFL is a volatile sport on a week-to-week basis. If a player has a bad week 2 weeks in a row, even if he's in a great spot this week, no one's going to want to play him because they played him last week. He lost them all their money. They played him the week before. They lost them all their money. We've also all chased these situations and not had it pay off. So we're like, oh, man, again, with the chasing of the guys who are doing bad. Doesn't matter. Got to keep going back to it. Let's say Odell Beckham has a terrible week 1 and a terrible week 2. A terrible week 3. But in week 4, the Browns have a matchup. High total. Great offensive team. Mediocre secondary. Against the Giants. Odell's former team. There is no such game, but I'm just saying. No one wants to play Odell in this game because he's tanked the first 3 weeks. It's like, or last year, I'll actually give a great example. Last season, it was so easy. It was such easy money. I think I won this tournament as well. Last season, I think it was week 2. And I don't remember if it was last season or the season before. Might have been the year before that. Where it was like week 2, Travis Kelce had like a bad week 1. And all you heard was Mahomes and Kelce, they don't have the best chemistry. This was a couple years ago. Mahomes and Kelce, they don't have the best chemistry. That's the word on the street. You read the generic breakdown articles. You listen to the radio. Oh, you can't. Kelce had a bad week 1, and no, him and Mahomes not on the same page. Mahomes loves Tyreek Hill, and that's who he likes to throw to, and whatever. Then in a showdown, no one's playing Kelce because the word is the guy to play is Tyreek Hill. You want to play Kelce there? Let the suckers follow the recency bias. you do the opposite in big field tournaments. Could be wrong. But if you give me Travis Kelce at 10% ownership, 5% ownership, and you have Reek coming in at 35, 40, 70, 80%, I think, in a showdown, let the suckers follow the recency bias. You have to play smarter than that. So, to summarize, top-heavy GPPs, all or nothing. We are playing these to win them. We're not playing to min cash. Don't even worry about min cashing. Stay away from wide receiver chalk. Stay away from the highest projected games unless you're doing some crazy game stacking, or you found some sort of an approach that the field won't be on. Let me go back to this example because I actually am going to remember there was a very important lesson from Bobby Wow's $1 million win. You can't see it here, but that was a week where Lamar Jackson was extreme chalk. He had scored. It was week 4. Lamar Jackson had just been going crazy week after week, the first weeks of the season. You know what? I want to bring it up. Hold on a second. I'm going to take this a step further. This was not planned. This is what happens when you do a live stream, guys. Show you something. Hopefully, actually, let me see if does DraftKings have the game logs. Let me see if they have the game logs from last year because I want to show you the game log from this game. It's very, very important. But as I continue, I'm going to explain what happened here. Here's your 1 million entry contest. Like, dude, you really want to fucking put some chalk against a million other lineups? You're crazy. Let me see if I have last year's game logs. I do. Okay. Week 4. Week 5. Maybe it was week 5. Maybe it was week 4. Maybe it was week 5. I can't remember. I feel like it was week 3, actually. I feel like it was this game. Okay, maybe it was week 3. You know what? Hang on. Let's go Mark Ingram because the example is very, very important. He'd destroy everyone. Yes, it was week 3. Sorry, Bobby Wow. I'm sorry. Okay, it was week 3. RB opposing RB. $1 million win. Now, what happened here? Ravens going nuts the first 2 weeks. Now it's week 3. Okay. First of all, Mark Ingram had a good week 1 against Miami. Did do nothing this week. 9.7 fantasy points. It's week 3. Okay. Let's take a look at what Lamar Jackson had been doing to that point. Going nuts. 36, 33. Still not overpriced based on this matchup. Too juicy to ignore. The Ravens are at Kansas City. They forgot. They didn't raise the salary of Lamar Jackson enough. It's a free square. Or is it? So everybody and their mother played Lamar Jackson, and they stacked him with Marquise Brown, and they stacked him with Mark Andrews, right? So you just saw his score. All right, like, wasn't too bad, right? Lamar Jackson got you 24 for the salary. It wasn't too bad. But here's what happened. Marquise Brown, 6.9. You're dead. You blew it. No chance. Okay? Andrews, what'd he do? 4.5. Murdered your lineup. He murdered it. Okay? So you're like, what the fuck? This game was so hot. It was the Ravens. It was the Chiefs. I played Lamar Jackson. It scored 32 points. He scored 28 4 touchdowns. What happened? I lost everything because I played the chalk stacks. Andrews, Brown, both a disaster. Now, how could you not play Andrews? He had come off of 27 and 28 points. Recency bias. Your gut is telling you I have to play him. This guy's putting up 27, 28 fantasy points per week. I have to play him. Bobby Wow said, fuck that. I don't want that smoke. He played Mark Ingram for all the monies. Week three, what happened? Mark Ingram, 38 fantasy points. What happened to Bobby Wow? He's a millionaire now. He's got $1 million because he made a smart pivot. Still played the good game, but when everybody zigged, he zagged. That's what it takes. If everybody's playing Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews, there's no point in playing that. You're going to go up against 500,000 other lineups. You're not going to win the monies that way. So how do you win the money? You have to do something different. Still build the correlation. Let's go look. It was week 3 now. We figured it out. Still build a correlation. QB, wide receiver, tight end, opposing wide receiver, full game stack. RB, opposing RB, secondary stack. This probably means he had Ingram and, the RB from the Chiefs. Whoever that was that week. Was it Damian Williams? Was it Damian Williams? I don't know. Let's see. Let's see who did it that week. Was it Damian Williams? Was it LaShawn McCoy? That's Dexter Williams. The fuck is that? Oh, he's not in the player pool because he opted out. Sorry. Oh, you know what? No Chiefs game here. Don't worry about it. The point was he probably played Damian Williams or LaShawn McCoy or whoever it was that was opposed. He had the correlation. 6 correlated players. But the genius of the lineup was, instead of playing Lamar Jackson, the chalk Mark Andrews, the chalk Lamar Jackson combination, which were great, and you should have played them probably in cash that week. It was the right play, even if it didn't work, because they were underpriced for what they were bringing to the table. In tournaments, there's no point in eating that chalk. So that is the approach to mass multi-entry GPPs. I hope this made sense to everybody. Again, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you want more of this type of content throughout the season, NFL is starting soon here. If you're watching this soon after I made this, it is September 2nd. We are 1 week away. DFS Army, you want to get signed up as a VIP, you'll get my pick sheet. You'll get all of our content, our optimizer, everything. Sign up at DFS Army, promo code GEEK. Throughout the season, I do a ton of content. I will have breakdowns or first looks at Draftkings FanDuel. Those will be free right here in this channel. So again, make sure to like and subscribe. A little first look lineups, first look at the Draftkings salaries, FanDuel salaries. We'll have look backs every single week, also free in this channel, where we look at what we did last week, at the sheets we made, what went right, what went wrong, tournaments, cash games. Did we win? Then throughout the week, we'll have the Geeks Vegas Line Show every single Wednesday. Myself and John Alicia, a.k.a. Statsational for Sportsbet Army, will look at all of the games, look at all of the lines, and look at them from both a betting and daily fantasy perspective. Later on in the week, for DFS Army VIPs, I will bring on some of the sharpest tournament players in the world with myself to break down each slate from a tournament point of view in what I call the Wolfpack podcast. And of course, every Saturday, I come back with what I call the Players Club VIP DFS Army subscriber only, where we break down the entire slate one last time, go through single entry approaches, 3-entry GPP, and some max multi-entry approaches. Throughout the season as well, I will have tutorials specifically focused on that week, where we go through the Domination Station Optimizer, and I teach you, as my subscribers, as my members, as my peoples, how to set up the optimizer to attack mass multi-entry tournaments for the week. You hopefully bring your own flavor to it and take down $1 million prizes, and let me know and say, thanks, Geek, and hit me up on Twitter and say, man, I listened to your shit and that was awesome, and I took it down $1 million. I'll be so happy for you. So that'll do it for this one. GPP, cash, single entry strategies, how to differentiate. Sorry it was a long one, guys, but it really takes a lot of time to describe this stuff. Again, dfsarm.com, sign up as VIP, promo code GEEK. Take care, everyone.